We're ringing out the old and ringing in the new with Woozy, the New Year clock. Welcome to Up All Night DIY. I'm Monica. Thanks for joining me. I make at least one New Year piece every year. Last year I made this guy, Tipsy. This year it's Woozy. Let's get into it. I'll be using some Model Magic, and I found another foam disc in my Christmas decks that I decided to use. I'm going to remake it. It has foam finish on it. I made this years ago. Foam finish dries to like a hard surface so that you can paint on styrofoam. Also, we need a foam ball. I cut flat spots on the top and bottom so it'll sit nicely on the disc. And we're just going to get started with this stuff for now. I'll grab a handful of clay and flatten it with my brayer, nice and thin. I trim the clay to fit the foam ball, and I'll wrap it around the ball until my ball is completely covered. I'll press the clay as I go to ensure that it's well adhered. And I'm going to roll it on the table to smooth it a wee bit, and I'll fill in any bare spots as I go. I'm going to work it until I'm happy with it. I just want to get it relatively smooth. I'm not going to worry if there's some lumps. That's okay. I mean, it is a handmade piece, so some lumps are doable. I cut a circle from the flattened clay for the brim of his top hat. I rolled more clay into a log shape to make the stovepipe top of his hat, and I slightly tapered one end. I'll cut off any excess. We don't really need that much. And I'm just going to roll it a wee bit more to enhance the taper, and I'll tap the ends to flatten them, and then I'm going to set that aside. Let's make his cheeks. This clay is a wee bit thicker for dimension. I'll use my smallest circle cutter to punch out his cheeks. I roll a ball for his nose. Actually, I want him to have a bulbous nose, so I'm going to make it light bulb shaped. I press his hat brim onto his head, and I'm going to shape it some. I push a toothpick into the center of the brim. I go about halfway down, and I slide the stovepipe part of his hat onto the toothpick. I roll a paintbrush handle over the area where the clay meets to incorporate it together, to blend the seams. Now let's get his cheeks in place. I'm just going to use my fingers to press them down. That's it. I broke off a wee piece of toothpick, and I'm going to push that between his cheeks. This will anchor his nose. I'll slip his nose right over top of that toothpick, and I'll shape it a bit, and then I'm going to set him aside to dry. Alright, so let's work on his body. Since this has that foam finish coating on it, it really only needs to be painted. I'll give it 2 coats of CERAMCOAT black, both sides. So I flattened more clay, and I found a wedge of a foam disc in my stash, so that's going to be his shoes / stand. I'll cover the wedge with the clay, and I'm going to smooth it a wee bit. Again, I'm not going to be too fussy with it. You really won't see most of the top of the shoe anyway. I rolled a clay ball that I'll cut in half, and I'll push these halves onto the wider edge of the wedge to give it like a heart shape. And then once I get that on there, I'm going to set everything aside to dry overnight. And you can see I'm just pressing them on there and kind of shaping them as I go. But if I had had a heart-shaped piece of styrofoam, that would have been easier. But this is good too. This works. The clay is dry and ready for paint. I'll start by giving his face 2 coats of CERAMCOAT white. Now, all of my New Year decorations are black, white, shades of gray, and silver. So that's going to be our palette today. While the white paint dries, let's paint his shoes with 2 coats of CERAMCOAT black. And while his shoes dry, we'll give his top hat 2 coats of black as well. I always start with the underside of the brim. I just find it easier. His bulbous nose, we'll get 2 coats of CERAMCOAT rain. And as always, I'll have all my supplies listed in the description box for you. I'm using a dauber and CERAMCOAT Drizzle Grey to paint in his cheeks. I used Drizzle Grey to give his shoes some spats. I like to give my characters either sneakers or spats. Since Woozy is all gussied up, he gets spats. Spats are those covers men would wear to protect their shoes in Victorian times. Sometimes you see them on grooms too, these days. Anyway, I'll outline his spats, then I'm just going to fill them in. They'll get 2 coats too. Anyone have any glamorous plans for the night? We just lay low on New Year's Eve. I painted his features with black, and I'm using my 000 liner brush for this. His eyes are a wee bit wonky, but he's Woozy after all. He needs some eyebrows and a cheeky wee smile, just like a half smile. With black, I dot some buttons on the sides of his spats. He's only getting 2 buttons, 2 on each side. He needs some character lines by his eyes, and he gets a chin. I'm using Drizzle Grey and my 000 liner brush. And we'll dot white highlights in his eyes. Grabbing my floating medium to do some shading. I prep my brush with the medium, then I side load by scooping up Drizzle Grey paint on the corner of my brush. I stroke my brush on my plate to load the bristles with the paint and blend it with the medium. This will give us a gradient of color from dark at the corner of the brush to lighter as it moves toward the middle of the brush. Holding the paint corner where I want my darkest shadow, I'm going to stroke under his hat and all along the bottom of his face. And I'll pick up more medium and or paint as needed. I float his spats with Rain Grey, just right along the edge there. And you guys know that The brush loading process is always the same regardless of the color. Even if you're going to highlight, it's always the same. Prep the brush and then side load. Now we'll shade his hat with some Hipoo Grey. I also shaded the top of his shoes with Hipoo Grey, but I don't know what happened to that footage. Anyway, it was the same process as shading the spats. And at some point, I give the top of his shoes a white highlight as well. Well, you'll see. But I didn't get that on camera either. Sorry, guys. So for shading his hat, I'm just really going around anywhere I think it needs it. Just flying by the seat of my pants, as they say. I printed on the cardstock a clock face, which I'm going to Mod Podge onto the body. I'm using a cosmetic sponge to apply it to both the disc and the back of the cardstock, and then I'll give the clock face a top coat of it too. And I give his shoes and his head a top coat of Mod Podge as well. I use black puff paint to trim the clock hands, and I'm going to sprinkle on some black glitter for some, New Year's Eve sparkle. I trimmed the perimeter of the clock with the puff paint and the black glitter too. His nose and cheeks will get silver glitter dots as highlights. Boop. And you know what? I'm going to put some on the clock too. Why not? His hat gets a silver ribbon band. I'm just using hot glue to attach it. I poked a hole in the bottom of his head with a Lollipop stick, which is what I'm going to use to attach his head to the body, for no other reason than it was handy. I'll add some hot glue in the hole to secure it. And I'm going to use a piece of Skewer to attach his feet to the body. And let's put a little glue in the hole in the bottom of the clock. Right, okay, let's attach his head. Oh, wait, I need to attach his collar to his head first. It's just a silver pipe cleaner that I formed into a circle. Almost. Okay, slide it in there. Good to go. He gets a silver bow tie from the same silver ribbon on his hat. To embellish his hat, I curled some pipe cleaners around the paintbrush handle, to make little, do for things. And I'm going to glue those on in a jaunty fashion because he's fancy. Yes, very fancy. And let's add a couple of glitter balls to mimic the Times Square ball drop. To make his arms, I twisted some thick pipe cleaner around itself, and I poked holes at the 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock position on his side. Hot glue will hold them in place. He's nearly ready for his party. He needs a wee party horn that I made from scrap paper, and I trimmed the opening with black metallic pipe cleaner. I'm going to make some curly cues from the silver pipe cleaner to tuck into the opening. This is how I made the doodad for his hat too. So I'm going to make 3 of those, and I'll hot glue them into place. We'll glue the horn to his hand. And I made a flag that says cheers for his other hand. Let's glue that into place. There, now he's ready to ring in the new year. Don't worry, he enjoys himself, but he never goes overboard. He'll have fun tonight and be ready for the Mummers Parade tomorrow and his roast pork dinner. Here's a final look. I hope you liked today's project. I want to thank you all for your kindness, support, and friendship throughout the year. I had so much fun creating and interacting with you guys. It's been such a pleasure. You're all so sweet, sharing your time with me, and I'm truly grateful for each of you. Cheers to a happy, healthy new year. Stay creative, my friends. Thanks for hanging with me. See you next time. Up all night with Monica.